This is another Poets at War General Report. And here's your General, Joshua David Ling.
Good luck.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the General's Report. I'm closing in on the end of Season 2 of Poets at War. There's certain things that allow me to break them into seasons, and I just kind of mentally reset. I usually spend a good time trying to get, a bunch of different people together to do Poets at War conversations with artists, and then, I kind of take a break, and it's not so much a break like producing, because I'm still doing General's Reports, I'm still doing a lot of other things, but with this one that's just coming out like right now as I'm recording this on Saturday, Abigail Falonga's interview is going to mark minus some of these General's Reports, will mark sort of the end of Season 2, and I'm going to make some big changes come Season 3 aesthetically, so keep an eye out for that. Also, I had a, place where I wrote down what I wanted to say, not entirely, and I need to pull it up, and I just have. So, today's episode is about, moving out, Moana, the 2016 film from Disney, and, growing up. I had an interesting experience with Moana, and I wanted to share that with you. And most of the story isn't actually about Moana, but Moana is sort of this interesting linchpin to the whole thing. So stick around. We're going to get into that. For those of you who don't know, I've been working on my website heavily, joshuadavidling.com. Go check it out. I have links to all the socials that I have there too, and we've kind of expanded the brood. I'm going to talk about that more a little bit later, but we now have a Discord, a Telegram, and not a lot of people are signed up for those. There's also, of course, the shout box on joshuadavidling.com. Totally, completely separate from any of the big tech sort of stuff. It is a separate company from me that runs it, but they've been around for a really long time. And they're really reputable, and they don't cancel people. Just generally a great experience to just go to my website, throw your nickname in, say hi, leave me a comment, leave a link to your work. If it's good stuff, I'll leave it there, and so, yeah, with that being said, let's move into our story today. So back in 2016 or thereabouts, we'll move back a little bit further. I'm not sure exactly what year, but around 2012-ish, my father began working at a company as a shipping and receiving manager. And it was a very startup-y kind of company. And he was like literally the only person in the warehouse full-time managing the whole thing. And so he and his boss and everything else gave me an interview because my dad needed some extra help for the Christmas season. And I got the job. And so I was hired on at this company, and I worked with him, and then my brother got hired on too because we needed so much extra help. It was a really good company for me, really kind of put me on an upward financial trajectory. I was able to help out the family a lot. Being in a homeschool Christian family, you don't have much of a separate bank account, quite frankly. It's a team effort. It really is. And it was voluntary on my part. I could have kept back some of my money. I could have complained, but then I wouldn't have a house, right? I wouldn't have, all these sorts of things. And so I was not exactly paying rent. I was kind of just buying groceries when things needed to be bought. I was, fixing things with my own money, just various things like that, as you do as being part of a family. And so basically, this was all going on, and I had gotten on, as you do in your 20s, trying to find the love of your life. There weren't a lot of options locally, so I turned to the internet. And I met some people through a site called sovereigngracesingles.com. I believe they're still around. And I had gone to California to talk to one person. I had gone to North Carolina to talk to one person. And both of those relationships eventually fizzled out. And that was really hard. And I was pretty determined to if I was going to make a third attempt at long distance, I was going to give it my absolute all. And then I met Casey, who is now my wife. Spoiler alert, I guess. But basically I met her, and we, exchanged some messages, and things were good. And this was the closest long distance relationship I had so far. She was 2.5, 3 hours away in Augusta, Georgia. For reference, I was in Alpharetta, Georgia. That was where I was born and raised, which is, a little north of Atlanta. So it was a good situation, and we met and talked several times. Our first film we saw together was Inside Out, but I'll leave that for another time. If maybe it might not even be worth telling, the whole thing. But we went and saw Inside Out, and hung out for several more times. She came and visited me. I came back and visited her, and we had a good relationship going, and I wanted to continue to pursue. So I bought a car because I was borrowing family cars to go, and they didn't want all the miles on it, and I get that. And so I spent about $2,000, and I got a 2002 Mitsubishi Galant. It was a very basic car, but I had some of the best times of my life in that car. The back and forth going to Augusta, and as you'll hear a little later on, some of the adventures that Casey and I had before we got married. So I'm not going to get into a lot of those right now. I'm actually going to save that for an episode on us getting married. That'll hopefully be the next general's report, but I digress. As all this happened, I was also working on securing a place in Augusta, or the alternative was securing a place for Casey, so that we could, become more serious in our relationship, have a move, figure out the situation. If she moved here, it would be more of a situation where we would be married a lot quicker. But it didn't work out that way. So what I did find, and the door that did open, was a deacon here at our church. He was a bachelor, and he had a room open up in his house, and he let me stay there for dirt cheap. It was a really incredible situation, and he was determined to help us. He saw that we were two people really trying to get married, trying to make things work, and he was just fantastic. And so that was great, and I had a good bit of savings, and I went ahead and quit my job. And this was not something that I did lightly. I actually didn't want to. I was still trying to figure out a situation for Casey to come over, but my father and I had a little bit of a professional problem, not so much a personal one. It was a situation where I believed that I could no longer serve God to the best of my ability in the situation that I was under my father in that job. And that also would be, it would hinder our personal relationship if I stayed in that job. So basically, my parents didn't like it, and I don't blame them necessarily, but I figured if I'm going to have to find another job in order to have a good relationship with my dad and everything else, I may as well go and try and find it in Augusta, especially because I had this place lined up. And so I moved. And finding a job here was really, really crazy. It's still very much a good old boys network here. It's changed a little bit because of COVID and some other things that we've gone through. But it was a situation where most people weren't willing to hire someone who had just come from out of town, mostly because Augusta is a very transient city. You see a lot of what I call pirates here, people who come, they work for a little while, they save up and deal with the cheap living, and then they move back to wherever they came from, Atlanta or Charlotte or, even somewhere up north or out west. And there's a lot of money to be made here because there's a lot of infrastructure building. There's the military base here, and there's the Masters tournament, which you can make a lot of money at if you're working, food service and other things during that. So, eventually I found a small Very, 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 very part-time job at a restaurant. And I won't go into a whole lot of detail as to what that was, but they were paying me in cash. I don't mind saying that. And I was, getting my cash, and Casey and I were still trying, have a relationship and have some cheap dates. There was a big fair in town, and we went to the fair. Well, I was wearing a hoodie with the big front pocket, what I'm talking about on the stomach, and I had my cash in there in an envelope, and we went on a ride. And that ride spun everything in my hoodie out and about and everywhere. And we went and tried to recover it all. I recovered my keys. I recovered my wallet. I recovered just about everything that I had, except, of course, that cash. Because that if it was found by employees, they were not going to be giving it back. These were traveling carny folk. And so I was completely broke at that point. Completely. Casey was making money, and she actually made the effort to save me, basically. That was my lowest point. It was a really, really hard time. Well, several months after that, a friend of mine from church actually got me a job working non-emergency medical transport. That job was a mixed bag, but I won't go into a whole lot of detail with that, but it was full-time. And I earned the money that I needed and was able to save for our marriage. And during that time, we continued dating and, spending a little bit of money here and there just to continue to have a relationship and have something to do. But we were saving like crazy. And one of the things we did was we went to see Moana. During that time, I'm really into Disney princesses. I still am to a certain extent, but of course, Disney's gone really woke in the past couple of years. There's all kinds of issues, even with Moana, and I'm not going to go into all of those. I'm going to do Disney princesses another episode, but needless to say, we went and saw Moana, and I had an experience. You see, Moana in the movie is totally fascinated by the ocean, totally captivated. She understands her place among her family, everything that she's, worked for her entire life, what her family's worked for to make her comfortable and where she's at and everything else. And she doesn't discount that at all. It was the first time I'd seen someone who was an I want more princess, but she felt guilty about wanting more. And I think that's something that really separates Moana from a lot of the other princesses. See the line where the sky meets the sea, it calls me, and no one knows how far it goes. And she says, every turn I take, every trail I track, every path I make, every road leads back to the place I know where I cannot go, where I long to be. And she says later, what is wrong with me? Like, I had felt all of that over the course of the previous years because I knew that I wanted to marry this woman. And it was both a combination of how much I loved her individually, but also my duty to God to become a husband and a provider and all of these things, a father, and all of these things that God had put in my heart as desires that I knew were good and righteous and just. And I had to back up my decisions, as crazy as they were, through scripture, to my family, to my friends, to myself. And it was a really, really crazy, hard time. And in seeing Moana, one of the things that really stuck out to me, besides, how far I'll go, is the song, I Am Moana. She, in that song, takes a second and contextualizes her entire journey at rock bottom. Keep in mind, this is like a month or two after my rock bottom that I saw this film. And she says, I'm struggling to remember some of the lyrics. I'm going to pull them up while we're doing that. Well, why not? We'll pull them up. I am Moana lyrics, and we're gonna go through some of these, and because this was really kind of a huge message, that God put in my life at a very specific moment, to remind me of the scripture, and to remind me that I did want something just and right and good. So, I know a girl from an island. This is Grandma Tala speaking. I know a girl from an island. She stands apart from the crowd. She loves the sea and her people. She makes her whole family proud. I never stopped loving my family. I never stopped loving my home, Alpharetta. I long for Alpharetta sometimes. It's the place where I grew up. There's trees and that there and stuff there that is so central to my existence. It shaped me into who I am. And there's a line, and I'm going on another poem again, J.R.R. Tolkien's The Road Goes Ever On, where he says, eyes that fire and sword have seen, and horror are in the halls of stone, look at last on meadows green, and trees and hills they long have known. That's how I feel about home. But I also knew that I had to go away from the thing that I loved to gain the thing that I had to love more before God. And so Grandma Tala continues, sometimes the world seems against you, the journey may leave a scar, but scars can heal and reveal just where you are. It's actually who you are, I think. But anyway, she says, the people you love will change you. The things you have learned will guide you. And nothing on earth can silence the quiet voice still inside you. Obviously, Disney means some kind of existential thing. I take that as conscience for myself, and I believe I can do that. This is another thing. I need to do a whole episode on authorial intent. Yes, the author can, intend something evil, and I, as a person, can take it the way that I want to take it, and the fact is neither are right. I'm not postmodern, and I'm not fully authorial intent, because what God intends to speak through a text is going to come through no matter what, both to the individual, through the author. There's so many different human intents, but all of them are completely superseded by God's will and God's intent. Anyway, we're going to do another episode on that. I need to write that one down. But she says the people, just who you are. She says the people you love will change you, the things you have learned will guide you, and okay. Then she says, and when that voice, I'm hearing conscience, starts to whisper, Moana, Joshua, you've come so far. Moana, listen, do you know who you are? And then Moana answers, who am I? I'm the girl who loves my island. I'm the girl who loves the sea. It calls me. I am the daughter of the village chief. We are descended from voyagers who found their way across the world. They call me. By the way, I am descended from village chiefs and kings and princes and dukes and knights and rulers and warriors all over Europe, and even some of Asia, and the United States, way back to the Cherokee. And so this is all, this is all important. I know this stuff at this time, I know a lot of this, not all of my genealogy, I know most of it now, but I knew some of this stuff. We are descended from voyagers who found their way across the world, and they call me. Now, this hit me in a way that is a little odd and a little bit more not existential. What's the term? Abstract. We are descended from voyagers. I had learned pretty recently to that point about my great grandfather, who wrote a book of poems. I had been delving into some of my mother's side, especially, who were all different kinds of performers. I had a classical pianist who was a big deal on my mom's side. I had found out during a little bit after that I'm related to P.T. Barnum's wife. I had learned that I learned more about my grandfather, my father's father, who was very performative in being an auctioneer and a clown and an apprentice hypnotist, and just did a lot of really public performative sorts of jobs over the course of his life. And so like I'm thinking about all of these things, you know, wanting to be a bard like I am, and wanting to be someone who's telling stories and writing stories, and all of the longings in my heart to do good and righteous things and somehow make a living for my family. All of this is coming together through this line: we are descended from voyagers. I am descended from performers, you know, and it's not wrong for me to want to perform. I was raised as a performer in the DJ business, which I've talked about on some recent episodes, and I'll deep dive into at some point, who found their way across the world, and they call me. The context of being descended from these performers is calling me to perform. I've delivered us to where we are. And when it says I, obviously God delivered us, because I sure didn't. But still, I made it somehow. I've delivered us to where we are, in that theater, watching Moana, hearing these words. I have journeyed farther. Back and forth, 3 hours away, 2.5 hours away, etc. I am everything I've learned and more. Still, it calls me. And the call isn't out there at all. It's inside me. Now we're getting back into some of the weird Disney stuff. But there is desire there inside of you, that when the Holy Spirit is working on you and shaping your desires to be what they ought to be, right? You're a Christian, you're following God's law, you know the priorities that God has for you, and you are attempting to do them to the best of your ability for God's sake. He can shape those desires to be exactly what He wants you to be. Okay, that's different from the world saying, well, everything that you are has to come out from what is inside you. No. It comes from God, who works from the inside out. That's what I'm saying. I'm everything I've learned and more. Still it calls me. And the call isn't out there at all. It's inside me. It's like the tide, always rising and falling. I will carry you here in my heart. You remind me that come what may, I know the way. I am Moana. You know, it's really funny. You know, I'm obviously talking about these particular moments. Overall, as a movie, I enjoyed it. And the context in which I enjoyed it was more personal. I think there's obvious flaws in the entire movie, and I'm not really even going to get into that. What I do want to get into is this transcendence that Moana is calling upon. You know, she talks, it's almost like she, and there's other Disney movies that do this. They make a claim of transcendence for the individual heart. And what's funny is there's truth in what they say, and enough truth to float a lie, right, as G.K. Chesterton talked about. And I'm not discounting, you know, the bad stuff that's in this, but God used a really crooked stick, an enjoyable crooked stick, by the way, to draw a very straight line in my heart that day. And He used it to remind me of the context in which I was made. The stuff that was completely beyond my control, and the way He has guided me through providence, through the dark sea of darkness, which I've talked about before, the section of rural land in between Alpharetta and everything that I talked about that in my Wing Feather Saga episode. But God used this movie to remind me of who I am and what I'm here for. in a time where I didn't think we'd ever, I didn't know. I hoped, but I didn't know. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know I'd be here now. I didn't know I'd be here talking to you. And I know that if you're going through that right now, remember who you are in Christ. And not just Christ is my identity, right? Like that's, of course, biblical. But God made you in a particular context in providence, in history, in creation, in the story he's writing. He made you a character. Okay? If you don't know what that character is, pray that he'll reveal it to you. But I think most people know beyond of a shadow of a doubt who they are. Not everyone, but a lot of people. And we kick against it with our pragmatism, with our worries of our heart being corrupt. And if you actually know, no little closed door is going to stop it. And obviously you have to be careful. You have to use wisdom. I'm not saying anything against pragmatic choices when they are the right choices, right? I just want you to realize that your desires are there for a purpose. And part of God's back and forth with you is teaching you the wisdom you need to know when he is kicking you in the pants to do what you need to do when you need to do it. And remember, be your family's bard. Do not turn to the right or to the left. And the Lord will be with you wherever you go. This has been Poets at War. If there's anything that I can do to this show or the artist conversations or any of the other things that I'm making, please let me know. I'm looking for more feedback. Also, join the Brood. You can join the Brood through Facebook Messenger. If you message me, I'll add you to the group. You can also do it on Discord. You can do it on Telegram. Both of those links are on my website. In the sidebar, you can see the logos and go from there. And also in that same sidebar on my website, there's a shout box. So if you're not into any of those platforms, you can still go to my website, sign up there. That service has been around forever and it's totally different from any social media. And you can just go to my website and leave a comment and chat with me. Thank you all so much. General's Report, Poets at War, out. The Lord be with you.